the air campaign a reality by fighting and winning the battles of the Pentagon. Prior to his service as a Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Rice was the President and CEO of RAND Corporation for 17 years. Then he served as Secretary from May 1989 to January 1993, a time period that encompassed not only Desert Storm, but the collapse of the Soviet Union. He redefined the contribution of the Air Force for the post-Cold War era with his global reach, global power, white paper. He presided over the Air Force's largest reorganization since its inception, creating Air Combat Command, Air Mobility Command, and Air Force Materiel Command. By doing so, he moved the service away from the artificial designations of commands as strategic or tactical to a realization that those terms describe outcomes, not inputs or things or airplanes. During this same time period, Secretary Rice managed to draw down nearly 100,000 active duty airmen, a number that seems mind-boggling today. After his service to our country, Secretary Rice became successful in business. He's continued to influence both future leaders through his ties with the RAND Graduate School and influence national security matters as a member of RAND's Board of Trustees. General Mike Lowe's combat experience traces back to Vietnam, where he flew 204 missions in the F-4 out of Da Nang Air Base, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross for his achievements. His experience in Vietnam, where the strategy held back the potential of air power, remained with him throughout his career, a career that included multiple tours and requirements and operations. During his time as the Vice Chief of Staff, and later as the Acting Chief of Staff in 1990, he would play a crucial behind-the-scenes role that would culminate in Air Power's overwhelming success during Desert Storm. After his prominent role, General Lowe was the last commander of Tactical Air Command and the first commander of Air Combat Command. Dr. Rice, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dave. I recognized a small part of that introduction anyway. We're ostensibly here to give you something of the view from Washington. And I think you'll find as Mike and I go through this, we're going to do a tag team, me first, him second, me third, him fourth, and me last. Some of it will sound like the view from Washington, and others of it will sound like the same kind of opinions you've been hearing from everybody else who's been up here. As has already been mentioned, Saddam moved into Kuwait. President Bush, consultation with Prime Minister Thatcher, as I recall, uttered the words that you've already heard, "This will not stand." Well, in that time, with that leader, in that setting, that was just about all the rest of us needed to know. It never occurred to any of us that our president would walk away from his red line. And that's not a comment on anything else. He immediately sent the Secretary of Defense out to the Middle East to arrange base access for not just U.S. forces, but for many allied countries that were going to get signed up to go there with us. Came back with the ability for us to move to, I think, 5 countries in the Gulf, and Turkey and Egypt. And then shortly after that, the President came to visit the Pentagon, and that really set the mission firmly in place and made it clear to all of us that we knew what our main job was for as long as this thing was going to take. And you can imagine what it might have been like. And, we met in the tank with the Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, and the Service Secretaries, Chairman, Vice Chairman, Service Chiefs, and the NSC Advisor and White House Chief of Staff, all there with the President. It didn't have to be a very long meeting because it was just setting the overarching goal and making clear to everyone that we were expected to do our part. immediately, the Air Force headquarters was put into full support mode. The very first deployments were decided and sent out, not decided by the Air Force, decided by the command structure, which, as I think you all know, when you get into this kind of a game, it runs directly from the President to the Secretary of Defense to the first sergeant commander in the field. And the rest of us were in support mode. So the first deployments were F-15Cs, and if you think that didn't make all of us uneasy, that there was going to be some period of time, and when it started, we weren't sure how long that would be. It was longer than we wanted it to be, when the best we could do if Saddam moved south was to buzz his forces. But fortunately, he didn't, and we got other things there pretty quickly. As you've already heard in much more detail than I could ever cover for you, the air campaign planning process was already kicked off by the staff in Air Force headquarters. Quickly, it was spread to the command, and the commander was actively involved in seeking further work of that sort. Mike's going to have a lot more to say about how all that went inside the Pentagon. It wasn't very long before we activated craft, which was a sure sign that organic airlift, as great as it was already seen not to be adequate for all of the movements that had to be carried out to get this thing done. And of course, there were further deployments, and lots of different forces ended up getting tagged to move out there. And I remember a couple of them that I did have some personal involvement in, along with Mike Love. In fact, the first one, the thing started with General Schwarzkopf calling for the forces that were, in some sense, assigned to SECAF. And if you remember, in those days, the wall had come down. Most, if not nearly all, of our best forces were, quote, assigned to NATO. And so the F-111Ds were on the list for CENTCOM, and he called for the aircraft assigned to him to be deployed. And I saw that list come in, and being from my RAND days, a serious student of precision weapons, thought, hey, these dumb bomb droppers are not what the general's going to need. And I think, if I remember correctly, I went in to see Mike Lowe, who was vice chief, he was acting chief because the chief was away, and said, hey, we got to figure out how to get him the F-111Fs. And I don't really know all the details, and I never wanted to learn. I don't know what's involved. I cooked it from there. Got the command to request the F-111Fs. Went to NATO, I assumed through USAFE, and got them released. So we could deploy the very aircraft that turned out to do tank bunking, in addition to the more serious attack missions that we had in mind for them. And of course, as has been mentioned, we were bringing the F-117 out of the black to deploy it, and that was a big surprise to an awful lot of people. But so that was just getting it going, and there was lots more. But while all that was going on, there was other stuff to do in headquarters. Just to remind you of a few things, the changes going on from the end of the Cold War continued. We forget that major thing in life, the reunification of Germany and the signing of the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty occurred during the period of Desert Shield. When we were managing our major systems acquisition programs, the YS-22 had its first flight. The first C-17 was completed. And of course, we were continuing to manage all the sticker shock and other testing anomaly issues and everything else associated with the B-2 program. All that going on at the same time as Desert Shield. And of course, there was the ongoing normal Air Force business. Global Reach, Global Powers has been mentioned, had just been released. Budget planning was beginning restructured into the global reach, global power categories for reviewing our capabilities against our resources. The Air Force budget, some of you might remember, was not quite in free fall, but it seemed like it sometimes. There are the numbers. FY90 budget, the first one, first full one we've done was $105 billion for the Air Force, and 91, which was the year that was just starting during Desert Shield. Our budget was already down to $88 billion, and headed for 84 in the review for the 92 budget that we were carrying out during the time of Desert Shield. So all this was headed to what came to be called the base force, as the target to draw down to from the force structure we had maintained during the Cold War. And the base closure review was just beginning to gear up. And all through this, we were trying to think through, discover, take any idea we could come up with for ways to cut the tail proportionate to the forces, because already there was talk of, well, 26 fighter wings will be enough instead of 38, this number of bombers instead of the number of bombers we have, and so on. And those seemed like the relatively easy decisions, though none of them were easy. Figuring out how to bring the infrastructure and the support establishment, everything associated with the tail down, was the hard part. In my view, was the hard part anyway. So you see what my speech line became up there. What time it's supposed to play for us didn't seem to be working the way it's supposed to. So let me turn it over to Mike to talk to you about the battle of the Pentagon during this period. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
When the invasion into Kuwait occurred and the planning began, air power was not in the lead. By no means was air power in the lead that first week in August. And so I was trying to figure out, I and others of course, trying to figure out how we could get air power in the lead for the upcoming war. And I got a call from General Schwarzkopf, bolt out of the blue. Never met him. Didn't know him. Well, know who he was, only by Storm and Norman. But he said, Mike, I need help. I said, what's going on? Yes, sir. What's the deal? He said, well, I need help in putting together an independent strategic air campaign. I couldn't believe it. There's a 4-star Army general talking about strategic air power. I've never seen one. So anyway, I said, well, he said, all I'm getting now out of my air team at MacDill is the standard airland battle stuff, close air support, battlefield air interdiction, maybe some deeper interdiction, but nothing of a really strategic nature. So I knew what we had going on with John Warden down in Checkmate, and I said, Schwarzkopf, we've been working on this the past week, and we'll have something to you in a couple of days. Please call General Powell and tell him that we're going to send a team down to you. And so then I called John Warden up, and he knew what happened. After that, he went 24/7, went down to Schwarzkopf 2 days later. Had this concept. I mean, we weren't doing any mission planning. We had strategic concepts where we could have both a strategic theater and a tactical theater in play at the same time. So but then I knew that we were heading for some trouble because I got a call from Powell's office, and he said, I need to talk to you guys Saturday morning, August 11th. John went down to Schwarzkopf on the 10th. That Friday, the next day, John and I were in Powell's office with the directors of the air staff, and they weren't in a very good mood. So that first battle in the war was a friendly battle. The second battle was not so friendly. What happened is John gave his normal brilliant briefing, which was heavy on theology and short on application. But that's okay, I provided some of the application stuff. And all of a sudden, we were taking incoming from, particularly the J3. Remember John, I won't mention his name, but television a lot after that. He was our version of Baghdad Bob. And so, and he said, you guys, you Arab guys, here you go again. You're thinking you can win the war all by yourself. You didn't do it in World War II. In Vietnam, you couldn't even stop the supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You didn't, and here you go again, thinking you're going to go off in the wild blue yonder, and on and on and on. Right, John? And so we, John, fought nobly, and I fought nobly, and we thought, hey, things have happened. From 1970 to 1990, we have gone through a rebirth of air power. We've got stealth, we've got precision weapons. And oh, by the way, the third asymmetric feature was we've got night. Night is no longer a sanctuary for the enemy. So, but apparently the Army's been asleep for these past 20 years in understanding what air power can bring to the fight. And we've also got, have you ever heard of red flag, where we trained with this? So long story short, in that meeting, Donald said, okay, all right, okay, go ahead. He was under enormous pressure. He was under pressure from Secretary Cheney. President Bush wanted us, he wanted a plan, he wanted it right away. Cheney was beating on Powell, and so Powell was under the gun, and so he said he wasn't going to turn us down, but he had a big problem with the Army. The Army had done zero plan for this war. And so, so he said, okay, press on, make it joint, get the Navy, this is not just an Air Force show, get the Navy and the Marines in here, and get some better intel, and press on. Okay, so we did, we sent John and David Sullivan over to Riyadh, and that battle, we kind of won that one, but things weren't over yet. The next battle in the war of the Pentagon was a series of skirmishes in September and October when all of the other service chiefs, having gotten inputs from their services about how the Air Force was taking the lead and they were going to be frozen out of this war, there were skirmishes in the tank by each of the chiefs of the other services trying to take the lead. They didn't like the notion that the Air Force was going to lead with a strategic air campaign in this war. That didn't sit well with any of them. We'll have that chart up there. The Navy CNO, John Horner straightened this out later when he got over to the theater under the JFAC. The Navy CNO wanted to operate just like we did in Vietnam. He said, we're going, hey, we're Navy guys, we know we got the Red Sea on the west side, we got the Persian Gulf on the east side, we're going to put 5 or 6 carriers in there. We're going to have route packages where we'll take the eastern side, Kuwait in, and we'll take the western side across Iraq. And you Air Force guys, you stick with that airline battle stuff. That's pretty good, tethered to the Army. And so we fought that over and over again. Well, we're not going to do this the way Vietnam did. We're going to operate like in the joint arena now with the JFAC, and the JFAC's going to control all air. The Navy never believed that at that time. Never believed it. Then the Marine came. The Marine Commandant came. I'm going to say Al Gray. Al Gray is a great guy. He was a Marine through and through. And he came in there with a spittoon and chimic tobacco. And we know how to do this. This is our kind of war. We're going to start with an amphibious landing from the Persian Gulf into Kuwait and drive those bastards right out of Kuwait. Even stronger language that he was fighting, he was arguing. Colin Powell had to put him down. I argued about, we want to do some of this stuff first. And all that. So at the end of the day, we won that skirmish. And then the Army chief, Carl Lano, good guy, but Carl Lano said, I don't mind you guys going off there chasing MiGs. They were always using the term chasing MiGs, but I need enough air power down there for the airline battle in Kuwait. That's where the action's going to be. I assured him that he would have more than enough of the traditional airline battle scenario air support, including deep interdiction down in the Kuwait theater. We were at that time contemplating the Baghdad theater first, and then Kuwait, and then we settled on, even before we went overseas, it would have to be simultaneous. It was. So we won those skirmishes, and air power stayed in the lead through September and October. The final meeting, the final battle, was another friendly battle, and that was next chart. Let me see. That was the meeting with President Bush 41, October 10th, 1990. Fantastic meeting. Buster Blossom came to town. Let me tell you a little bit about the night before. Buster gave a terrific briefing to Powell, Cheney, the four service chiefs. I was the acting chief at the time, and in the tank the night before we went to here. Fantastic briefing. The Army briefing was falling apart. It was straight up the middle. It didn't have any innovation, no thinking, no clear thinking. It wasn't a good plan at that time. And Powell was very upset. But he was also upset that the Air Force plan was so highly developed by Buster and Chuck Horner at that time that it looked like we were ready for war in October. And so on the way out of the briefing, I go upstairs to my office and Colin Powell grabs Buster. And he said, Buster, when we go to the White House tomorrow, don't make it sound so easy. You make it sound like this. You're going to lose a lot more planes than you think. This isn't going to go the way you brief it. And so, Buster, what's he going to say to the chairman? Yes, sir, yes, sir. So he comes up to my office and he said, no, what should I do? I said, Buster, don't change a thing. But when we go to the president, we invoke General Schwarzkopf's name every now and then. This is not an Air Force plan. This is not even General Horner's plan. This is General Schwarzkopf's plan. It is a joint plan, and General Schwarzkopf has approved it. So we went to the White House. Buster did a great briefing. Colin was squirming in the seat, and mostly because the Army briefing was not well developed. It was very immature. And at the end of the briefing, he said, "That's great." He says, Brent, he was talking to Scowcroft, the National Security Advisor. Brent, is this general telling me, is he blowing smoke? And Brent said, no, sir. So the Air Force is capable. The Air is capable of doing this stuff. He said, I want to go to war now. I want to go now. He said, I'm having a hard time keeping this Middle East coalition together. Really hard time. And he said, I've got the support of Congress, and we got the UN on our side, but that ain't going to last very long. So he was on to go. The president wanted to go. And he wanted to go there. And Colin Powell interjected and said, Mr. President, said, we need another Army Corps before we will have overwhelming force. Because I can't assure you that even after the air campaign extends itself, that Saddam Hussein can still climb out of the rubble and say, well, after all that, here I am, I'm still in charge. And so, long story short, Powell got permission to get the 7th Corps, heavy corps from Germany to Saudi. Man, that took every bit of transportation that the Germans had, the US had, everybody had to get that 7th Corps. It was a good thing that we did that, but it took longer than we thought, and that's why we couldn't go to war on October 10th or 11th. We went to war on January 17th. Now I'll turn this back over to Dr. Rice. Press on. More to come.
Thanks, Mike. He'll be back soon, don't worry. So, picking up right off of that October 10th meeting with the president, we had already been thinking about it and working on it, but somehow we got permission for me to make a trip out to the Gulf in late October to show support, thanks to our deployed forces, but also to talk with our hosts in all these many countries that we were now deployed to and try to make an assessment of that those relationships were okay. So all of a sudden, I'm sort of part Air Force Secretary and part some kind of amateur diplomat. 15 days out of Washington, we did 25 air bases and 8 capitals. Met, of course, with heads of state and ministers of defense pretty much everywhere. Met with not just U.S. but allied and host country Air Force leadership. My staff estimated that I shook hands with over 5,000 airmen in the course of that trip. And it was memorable for lots of reasons, but let me just mention 2 of them. I spent about an hour one-on-one with General Schwarzkopf. And as you've now just heard, he was just having learned that his air campaign plan was very well received in Washington, but his ground campaign plan was, to say the least, not well received. And he was horsemen are. We talked about all kinds of things, how the Air Force forces were ready and so on. But he kept coming back with the maps in front of me. Kept coming back saying, "I've got to find my engine. I've got to find my engine," referring, of course, to MacArthur's envelopment amphibious landing in Korea. He did eventually find it, obviously, in the left hook. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit on the next chart because there's more to be said about that. The other experience I'd like to relate to you that I don't think the story's ever been told is that we ran into an unexpected diplomatic and policy challenge in Israel. Turned out I was the highest ranking U.S. official who'd been to Israel in over a year. Because even back in those days, we were fighting with them about, guess what? The settlements. Times change, but they don't change, right? So what I ran into was that the immediate demand from the Avi Ben-Nun, Chief of their Air Force, and Moshe Aarons, their Minister of Defense, that we needed to give them the air deconfliction codes. Well, wait a minute. Let's back up here. Tell me why you're going to need the air deconfliction codes. Well, he says they were absolutely sure that we were not going to persuade Saddam to pull out of Kuwait, that there was going to be a war. And they said when the war starts, he will attack us, and we will have to retaliate. And of course, that'll bring Syria and Jordan in the war on Saddam's side, but we will have to retaliate. Wait a minute. We're going to have all these, we've already got a whole lot of air forces deployed. We're going to deploy more of them. We've got allies who are deploying air forces. We're going to have enough there to cover all the targets in Iraq that we can come up with. And I'm sure, in addition, any ones you can tell us about. It turned out, by the way, when we got their list later, Dave tells me we had about 90% of them already covered. Oh, well, it'll be a political imperative. Just for the home folks, we will have to retaliate if we're attacked. So I literally had this discussion 3 times. Let me see. Are you sure you're making sense? You know, we go through it over and over again in the space of 2 days. So we took that message back home, of course, and it got passed around. It was out of my hands from there on, but as you all know, it turned out not long after that the decision was made to deploy Patriots to Israel. Turned out they were only partially effective, but they turned out to be the big league that let them stay home and not fly their airplanes. And of course, we never gave them the air deconfliction codes. So while all that was going on and beyond, of course, the support from Air Force headquarters was essential. The air campaign plan continued. The folks in the cells that you heard about did an incredible amount of detail work, tapped intelligence sources from literally all over the world. I remember a couple of examples of getting information from Eastern European companies who had built aircraft shelters for the Iraqis and got detailed engineering information about them, and that was a great help in how best to attack them and what to attack them with, all that kind of thing. And as you also already know, we made sure we had the tool out there for two-way, to make sure the two-way communications worked, as well as to contribute to Buster and Chuck's planning in his own right. So we never tried to make, as far as I was aware, and certainly was my guidance, we don't make any decisions in Washington. What we do is provide those folks with information that can help them put together a better air campaign plan, a better testing order every day. So a couple of hopefully quick anecdotes because the time is marching on. The first night of the air campaign, as far as I'm aware, it was the first time ever some of us had a front row seat to watch individual aircraft tracks on a screen from theater surveillance assets sitting in Washington, D.C. see the Air Armada moving forward across the screen, and that was, I must say, an edge of your seats kind of experience. And then we had CNN on too. And some of you may remember that about 20 minutes to H hour in Baghdad, CNN broke into international programming and showed the world the air war over Baghdad had begun. And that happened because our helicopter made attacks on the early warning radars in southern Iraq, took out those radars, but apparently at 22 minutes to H hour, apparently before they were completely destroyed, someone got a telephone call off to Iraq saying, hey, we're under attack. And in Iraq, in Baghdad, excuse me, and in Baghdad, they started shooting everything they owned into the air. So here comes three guys, Shaw, Holloman, and Arnett, as I remember were their names. They broke into international programming, showing the world the air war over Baghdad. If you were watching it, you heard them say things like, that sounded like an F-111 going by. That sounded like a cruise missile going by. While they were showing this screen full of tracers and missiles flying and all kinds of things. And of course, what happened was when they got that call in Baghdad, they started shooting everything they owned into the air. So then CNN became our best intelligence source briefly. Because at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning Baghdad time, you remember seeing the video of the bomb going down the air shaft of the AT&T building in downtown Baghdad, exploding on the 5th floor where it took out the telephone exchange? Well, at exactly that time, one of those guys said, hey, the telephone just went down.
2 minutes later,
we got told that the second F-117 in Baghdad was exactly on time because 2 minutes later, exactly, they said, hey, the lights just went out.
Yeah.
So the attack on the electric switching station in downtown Baghdad occurred as it was supposed to. So as I said, the support of the air campaign continued all through the war. We continued providing that kind of intelligence support, and I made sure that those, because it was a two-way communication, the checkmate cell planning team knew results to date as well as the next plans, and I got the senior civilian leadership there to be briefed several times during the course of this, just as part of the political top cover for the whole exercise. And I think that was probably helpful. The chairman was not real happy about that because he preferred that communication to the Secretary of Defense flow through him, and obviously this wasn't flowing through him. One last thing for this part of it. My belief is, and others of you in here may be able to agree or disagree with this. I think the ground war, a lot of people thought we ran the air campaign until it was kind of getting done what it was supposed to do, and then we did the ground war. The ground war started the first day the United States Army was ready to go. And since I had invited the Secretary of the Army a couple of times to get the briefings at Checkmate, he invited me over to get the first day's brief out in the Army briefing. And we heard about all this, and the performance was obviously magnificent. The left hook and so on really worked, and the Army had covered an enormous amount of ground in the first day. And so we got finished with all the briefing, and everybody stood up and was ready to file out. And I thought, as a guest, somebody had to say something, so I stopped and said, I'd just like to congratulate the United States Army on a magnificent performance. It's really remarkable what you've been able to accomplish on the first day. And as we filed out, that Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, who later became the Chief of Staff of the Army, said in a low voice as I passed him, your guys made it awful easy for us, sir. And I've treasured that comment ever since, and I wanted to pass it along to you because I didn't think it was say. Back in those days. Then, before the day was over, General Schwarzkopf holds his press conference, right? And before the whole world on television, talking about the left hook, he said, we ran our Hail Mary. Well, I wanted to throw my shoe at the TV screen. I caught him a couple months later in D.C., and I said, Norm, Hail Mary is a desperation play. You didn't run a Hail Mary. You ran student body left. And he said, you're right, Mr. Secretary, but unfortunately I had already said it and I was stuck with it. So, back to Mike.
I only have 3 charts and a few words, but from my experiences with Desert Storm in total, and since then, I try to figure out 2 or 3 macro strategic lessons learned, not tactical lessons learned or even operational lessons learned, big picture stuff. And I've come up with 3. The first one is up there at the top, and that is all through the years since then, air power has been consistently underestimated, suppressed, somebody mentioned it already, I think Ron Bass did, and not well understood by the other services or by our civilian leadership. Going into Desert Storm, as I mentioned, I failed to recognize that there was a real rebirth of air power in terms of asymmetric advantage, the so-called second offset, which I call stealth, precision weapons, and night attack, which was key. In Vietnam, we operated under flares at night, didn't hit anything. I did, but the rest of it. But then when we went from flares to FLIR, that's what I call the difference. Flares to FLIR, it made all the difference in the world. The enemy had no sanctuary at night. He couldn't rearm and resupply, move things around, because we could attack them at night with accuracy. But today also, air power is disparaged because we get in this argument about air power versus boots on the ground. So all the Army guys, retired Army guys, want to badmouth air power because they want to get boots on the ground. And that's a false comparison, as you know, and therefore we need to do something about that. I put up at the top, even in our Air Force, because we're a little bit guilty. A few years back, we were all for jointness. We were Boy Scouts. We said, we'll support you. Who needs support? Army needs support. Marines need support. We'll support you. And we got to the point where the Air Force became more of a support force, it seemed like, and a force capable of independent air and independent operations. We've got to consider a strategic air campaign like Desert Storm as part of the theater commander's overall plan, as part of the joint plan. It happens to be not tethered to the Army. And then finally, I'm so tired of hearing about the 100-hour war. You go to any army, you go to Fort Leavenworth, you go to Fort Leavenworth, you go to Fort Benning, you go to Fort Knox, you go to Fort Eustis, down where I live, and they've got a museum there, and you walk in, Desert Storm, the 100-hour war. 100-hour war. I just get upset at that. Okay, next, the major lesson learned is one that's been a pet peeve with me for a full career, and that is attrition is always overstated. The experts don't know how to model campaigns. They know how to model individual variables and the impact of changing a variable on air attrition on changing a variable too. But then they try and extrapolate, the modelers try to extrapolate from 1v1 or 2v2 or against one SAM versus another to a whole theater operation, and it falls apart. And why does it fall apart? Because they can't model all the things that you've been hearing about all day, all the changes in tactics, the audibles at the line of scrimmage, the things that happen, the unseen decision making by everybody. That's not, you can't model that. And that's how we keep attrition down. So you hear today about they're 10 feet, they've always been 10 feet tall, and all their systems always work 100%, 100% reliability, and all that. They're not 10 feet tall. They're tall, and their systems do work, and we've got to deal with them. But But now I hear, when I read things and look at things, this A2AD, there are two big buzzwords in town right now. One is offset, and one is A2AD, A2AD, area denial, anti-access area denial. Oh, we can't penetrate anymore. I've been hearing we can't penetrate with air for 55 years. And we can penetrate. These guys show you how to penetrate. And if you go against any integrated air defense system today, we could do it. We could do it better with the systems we have in development. That system over Baghdad was the carry fridge system. It was a sophisticated, state-of-the-art system. So let me put up a chart next that shows you a little bit of experience. And Desert Storm, let me go to the bottom. Oh, I gotta do this myself. Desert Storm. Look at the bottom. Desert Storm, the predictions were, even among us airmen, we're going to lose. President Bush, how many airplanes are you going to lose? I said, well, we'll lose 25 or 30 the first night. We'll see pilots drag through the streets of Baghdad. You're going to see second night, maybe 20, maybe 30. After 4 or 5 days, we'll have complete air dominance, and we'll probably lose maybe 70 airplanes. That was coming from an expert. Right? How many airplanes did we lose? 28. Less than 0.4% retreat. We go up to the top. This is for Greg Biscoe. Linebacker 2, December 1972. We flew B-52s into the teeth of the state-of-the-art air defense system at that time over Hanoi. And we flew 729 B-52 sorties. And I remember to this day, the prediction is if you fly B-52 in the teeth of that threat, you're going to lose 1 out of 3. 1 out of 3. That seems to be a standard term when you talk about lumbering, high RCS B-52s. 1 out of 3. We flew 729 sorties in linebacker 2 and lost 15 B-52s. Not 33%, 2%. Why? For all the reasons we've just been talking about. And I called the attrition modelers back then and said, hey, come on and explain your model. And I haven't heard from them since. The Israelis in Bekaa Valley, same thing. Remember when they took down the air defense system that the Syrians had put up in the Bekaa Valley? It was a modern Soviet air defense system modeled after what we would have to face if we went against Warsaw Pact. And the prediction in those days was we're going to lose about 15% in taking out that air defense system. They took it out with 450 sorties in 2 days using U.S. tactics and U.S. airplanes and U.S. drones and all of that. And how many did they lose? Zero attrition, not 15%. So beware of computer modelers selling their computer. And they're out there today saying we can't penetrate, we're going to do the all standoff, and it's too expensive to do all standoff. Don't mind it, too expensive, we've got to do both. But beware of experts selling attrition models. Okay. Now the last next chart is my last one. I'll quickly go through this because it's very important. The third major lesson that I got out of Desert Storm, which is applicable today in spades, is when you have decisive leadership at the very top and decisive leadership all down through the chain of command by leaders who know what they're doing, then you're going to have a successful operation. President Bush gave clear directions. He set the military objectives. You've seen them earlier. He let the military develop our own air and ground campaigns. He did not interfere. He did not. The National Security Council did not interfere. They didn't pick targets. He said, you military guys, give me a good plan and you stay out of the politics. We did, and it worked. And we insisted on overwhelming force, like the South for getting back there. And he agreed. He didn't question or challenge what we did in the military. And there was enormous pressure not to invade at that time. I don't know if you remember it. Even General Powell didn't want to invade. He said, let sanctions work another 6 months, another year. He didn't want to invade. There was a hearing on November 25th by the Senate Armed Services Committee. Chairman Sam Nunn. Sam Nunn voted against going to war after hearing the testimony of 8 out of 9 former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who wrote a letter and testified not to go to war. And one of those former chairmen was an Air Force person. Don't go to war. Brookings Institute had a study. You're going to need 10,000 body bags. The Army study, we need 8,000 body bags. How many body bags did we need? 148. 10,000? 148? Great work, great work. Air power. So anyway, and then after, when all the objectives were met, he stopped the war. And he didn't go into this endless, mindless nation building. He said, we're going to stop this war. We hope we have set the conditions right with all the devastation so that somebody will overtake this regime. But in the meantime, we're going to put up a no-fly zone. We're going to put up a no-fly zone over total Iraq from Turkey to Northern Watch, from Saudi to Southern Watch. And we did that for 12 years, and nothing militarily moved. No-fly zones, if done properly, work. And in my opinion, much better than nation building. Okay, that's it.
As you might imagine, I could have had some of the ideas Mike just talked about in mind for lessons learned as well, but I had the benefit of seeing his charts before I had to finalize mine. So I just put a few additional ideas together here as a retrospective. Picking up where Mike just left off, I will always feel that we made two mistakes at the end. That you will never know how much difference it would have made. But it sure would have been nice to spend another 24 or 48 hours chewing up those Republican Guard units that escaped across the river. And it would have made a difference in what we had kind of encouraged the Shiites and the Kurds to take on if we would have included helicopters in the no-fly zone restrictions. I know that the deal that was made with Saddam was because we'd taken out the bridges and they figured they couldn't get across the rivers, but somebody should have thought to say, okay, lift helicopters, but not armed helicopters. Assuming we could tell the difference. If we couldn't tell the difference, then no helicopters. We'll build you pontoon bridges or something. But I'm not going to belabor the point because no one can say how much difference it really would have made. I do remember a statistic out of looking at all of the results, which is up there in the second bullet. Over the 6-week campaign, on average, over the whole time, the 6 carriers that were deployed generated on a daily average number of ground attack sorties equal to what 6 Air Force squadrons produced. Just file that one away. And then a little bit, a fair amount's been said about this already. During the budget season that year, talking about one of my favorite subjects, probe and drogue on the tankers was another one, which I guess I didn't mention here. It was stuffing more resources back into developing smart weapons. And a certain chief of staff who ought to remain nameless said to me, Mr. Secretary, you have to understand that a smart airplane can be just as good as a smart bomb. And after the Gulf War, I've never heard anybody say that again. Now, of course, if we could have kept them down flying at 200 or 400 feet or something, maybe it would have looked like they were almost as good. But it turned out we couldn't, for all the reasons we heard about earlier today already. And we had the problem that we had the advantage, Mike says, the stealth precision night ops had demonstrated a tremendous difference, but they didn't deal with all the weather problems. We weren't any good at bombing through cloud, smoke, fog, haze with our laser systems. And once we pulled the F-16s up to medium altitude, we made so many pretty craters in the sand that our intel guys couldn't count them all. Didn't have many targets. And that's why, what are the numbers? Dave, help me remember, 10% of the aircraft we had out there had precision delivery capabilities, and they ended up hitting 90% of the targets. So that's why, after the war, I took it upon myself, based on a technology review that we quickly did, to start the JDAM program, which is the GPS guided Then we got voted out of office, and the folks that came along behind us didn't pay much attention to that. And frankly, the Air Force didn't do much paying attention to it either. So 7 years later comes the Kosovo campaign. What shape is that program in? It has 400 R&D versions of the JDAM. That's what existed. There's no procurement-based derived systems. There were 400 R&D versions. That's why the B-2s flew all the way from Missouri to Belgrade for the first week or 10 days, or whatever it was, of that campaign, when the weather was so bad that nothing else could fly over there in Europe to do anything. But the B-2s did it. So B-2 bringing the stealth and the night operations with JDAM carry out the air campaign at the time the commander-in-chief wanted it, which we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. And of course, that was also when we, I think mistakenly, bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. And when I got the news about that, I said, well, there's good news and there's bad news. Bad news is we've had an egregious intelligence failure and we bombed the Chinese embassy. The good news is from 35,000 feet, all 3 bombs hit the building. That's enough.
Dr. Rice and General Lowe, thanks very much for those insights. I think everyone would agree that it took everybody forward and rear to make this all work. So again, a small token of our appreciation during that.